somewhere in the Atlantic. A naval warship is on a special mission to transport a brand new fleet of 21st century aircraft across the globe to go to war for the first time. They have brought a new, different, and mysterious weapon. The like of which has not been seen on any battlefield before now. It's called the V22 Osprey. Part helicopter, part plane. They are headed for Al-Assad, Iraq. It's a sprawling airfield, bigger than many American towns, the second largest military base in the war zone. Al-Assad is known most recently as the hotspot of Iraq. The area has seen some of the most brutal combat of the war against Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda. It's the new headquarters for a U.S. Marine Corps Assault Support Squadron, VMM-263. Coming from its home base in North Carolina, the unit is made up of 250 men and women, flying and supporting 10 Osprey V22 aircraft. The Osprey could become a superstar of modern aviation. It's able to take off and land like a helicopter in the roughest terrain, fly at the speed of a plane, and climb to more than 25,000 feet, refuel in midair, and fly vast distances. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Joseph Rock Jr. is the commander of the squadron. The Osprey's arrival here is a personal milestone. He has been a Marine Corps pilot since 1990 and remembers a time when the Osprey was little more than a dream.
And for a long time, the V-22 was probably categorized as an urban myth. It was out there somewhere, somebody was working on it. You knew somebody who knew somebody who had seen one once. Seeing it was like seeing Elvis or Bigfoot.
Rock started as a test pilot for the Osprey in 1997 and has been flying it ever since. He thinks the Osprey is made to order for the war in Iraq.
From the standpoint of taking it to the bad guy, you got a lot more options.
On her second deployment to Iraq, Captain Elizabeth Akaraba first flew helicopters in combat in 2004 and understands the challenges of the battlefront.
I think the V-22 has fit into just about any and every mission that's out here.
This is an aircraft, can take off vertically, fly 8 hours, and land pretty much anywhere. You don't need a 10,000-foot runway or whatever. If you need to land in the middle of a soccer stadium, or you need to land within the confines of an embassy compound, or you need to land right outside some bad guy's house because you're doing a hit where the grunts are going to go get them. I mean, that is what it really brings. I mean, it's a whole lot more flexibility in moving combat power around.
Captain Sarah Fabersoff is another pilot with the squadron who will be flying the V-22.
It's new technology, a completely new technology. You're going from a helicopter and turning it into an airplane. It is a transformer like you see in the movie.
The big question the squadron faces: can the Osprey prove itself in the reality of warfare? Among the most expensive aircraft of its type ever invented, the Osprey cost more than $20 billion to develop. Price tag for 458 of them, more than $50 billion. But there's much more at stake than just money. The evolution of the Osprey also has been written in blood. 30 men died in notorious crashes of the Osprey in the 2 decades it took to develop. Can the Osprey escape its dark past? What has been called the world's riskiest plane has come to Iraq. Perhaps the world's riskiest place to find that out.
When you're trying to advance, when you're trying to do something revolutionary and bring a tremendous capability like that, it's not without pitfalls and risks. Yeah, this is an aircraft that's had an extended developmental history, and it is a revolutionary technology, and it's different, and it scares people.
The squadron's assistant operations officer, Major Wes Spade, is on his 2nd tour in Iraq. The Ospreys have been at the Al-Assad base for 4 weeks, and Spade is coordinating plans to take infantry troops into combat. But he has to face concerns the ground forces have about the aircraft.
We realize this is a new platform, this is a new capability. There will be some growing pains. There will be some anxieties. And the cells will always be there. So, we want to make everyone aware of the capability, but we're not, certainly don't want to force it on anyone.
So Spade must tackle things one step at a time.
We wanted to get daily operations in and around, our base and the airfield. That was our first priority. And the best way to do that is just provide general support to Marine sailors, soldiers, basic logistics movement, movement of personnel and gear from one forward operating base to another. Airfields in and around from our home base at Al-Assad all the way to the furthest reaches of Iraq out to the west, and then into areas like Baghdad. Certainly we've shown to be very capable of doing that.
But despite these achievements, there is still a reluctance to actually send the Osprey on a tactical mission.
It's just that we don't have our established role yet.
We knew coming in, we could think we're going to do certain things, and we prepared to do certain things, but you never really know what exactly you're going to do until people start asking you to use it. The job is to find out, because you support the infantry, the ground combat element, what do they want? How do you get them what they want?
The most difficult thing about being an Osprey pilot or in the Osprey community is having to reestablish ourselves, to fight just to be accepted as a part of the team is very difficult. We want to help the mission, we want to save lives, we want to fight the good fight, but we have to get through the established norms. We have to help people see us as not outside the paradigm, but perhaps a better portion of a new paradigm.
The commanders and pilots know they have a great opportunity here to prove the Osprey and its capabilities. But they also know that the stakes are high. A failure now could doom the aircraft's future. A Marine Corps aviation squadron is putting the world's newest aircraft to the ultimate test in the brutal sands of Iraq. The squadron, with the improbable call sign of the Thunder Chickens, comes with a vibrant history that explains its name. First activated as a Marine transport unit in 1952, the squadron gained fame in Vietnam, flying the legendary double-rotor helicopters called C-9 CH-46s, or frogs, that became a symbol of that war. Known at first as the more regal Thunder Eagles, the squadron became the Thunder Chickens when there was no word in the Vietnamese language for eagles. So chickens they became, and chickens they remain. In 2005, the Marines began to phase out the frogs. The old squadron was shut down and relaunched in 2006. for the Ospreys, a new unit dedicated to a new aircraft.
There's something called a plank owner, which is a tradition in both the Navy and Marine Corps, that if you are part of a new squadron or a new unit standing up, you're called a plank owner. And if you look at all the Marines here at VMM 263, we're all plank owners, meaning we started the squadron together as VMM 263.
And the squadron sergeant major says they knew what they were getting into.
The time and service of the majority of Marines in my squadron are post 9/11. They joined the United States Marine Corps knowing that the odds was in the favor of them coming to Iraq or Afghanistan.
The leader of the maintenance crew has 3 decades as a Marine, but many on his team were not even born when the Osprey was first tested. Yet they are helping to keep aircraft that cost $70 million each in the sky.
The board that shows the status of the aircraft that maintains control. A lot of people, they walk out at night and there's, we have 10 aircraft and there's 4 or 5 red arrows, meaning down aircraft that can't fly. And they walk in the next morning and there's 10 green or blue arrows, means they can fly. And to them, it's just a magic transformation. They forget that there's, 80 or 90 human beings out there, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, whether it's raining, whether they have a hangar, whether or not those planes are going to get fixed that night. And those are those 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds out there that they're out there fixing an aircraft that you're going to put 24 Marines in and fly them into a hot LZ.
They may be young, but they're not just maintenance men. They've actually made changes in how the aircraft is put together.
And when we got this, there was a lot of things that they actually took our word for it, looked at it, evaluated it, and changed it. And they started seeing the logic of it and why we came up with those ideas. To actually realize that something you saw that you were like, hey, that could be better, and you say that and they actually do it. Some of that actually, it turned out pretty cool. My father's exact words is that I'll be a part of history. I'll be able to work on something that's going to revolutionize the Marine Corps and the way we do things.
It's a job they take very seriously.
A lot of us sit there and joke that every time one of these birds go up, it's running off of our own blood, sweat, and tears, and that's exactly how it is. We've been on it, for most of us, for quite a few years, and we worked on it so hard that this is our family, and these are our children. And it was probably the proudest moment of my life, seeing it land on this flight line out here in Iraq.
But these youngsters also have some high-powered veterans they can turn to. Jerry Greer and John Allen are 2 of the 14 engineers and mechanics assigned to the squadron from the company that invented, devised, and manufactured the Osprey.
With a chance to take a new aircraft into combat for the first time and to prove what this aircraft can do was something I didn't want to miss. Yeah, everybody always jokes that Jerry invented the V22. He's been around it since '88.
And Jerry is still excited about the Osprey.
It's got stuff in it that's never been done on any other aircraft.
I don't know, I think it's pretty cool. It's definitely different. I mean, just even coming here, people see the airplane and they just do not know what they're looking at. So yeah, the gee-whiz factor is fairly high.
By design, the Osprey lives up to its reputation as both a helicopter and a plane. What are rotors on takeoff become airplane props in the air.
Basically, is it an airplane? Is it a helicopter? It is both and neither.
In fact, the Osprey has incorporated some of the best attributes of both helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. Its greatest strength is speed, which is more like an airplane's than a helicopter's. While the world's fastest helicopter has reached a speed of 249 miles per hour, the Osprey can top it at 360 miles per hour, with a cruising speed of 317. Like a first-class race car, the Osprey's horsepower is awesome. Each of its 2 engines puts out 6,100 horsepower, almost double the power of most helicopters. Another advantage, the Osprey can fly more than 1,000 miles without refueling. In combat, that means the Osprey can safely fly a radius of 430 miles from its base. For the commanding general of Al-Assad, that puts his entire region within reach.
It opens greater options for you from, say, Al-Assad and cover the entire battle space in 30 minutes.
The Osprey can reach heights unimagined in the best helicopters, up to 26,000 feet, and it can get to that ceiling at almost 12 meters per second. The Osprey's speed and altitude make it a difficult, elusive target, with flares that increase its survivability against heat-seeking missiles. It's also manufactured with carbon fiber, a futuristic, high-tech layered material that is as strong as steel and able to absorb ballistic damage and limit its spread from the point of impact. For self-defense, the Osprey is outfitted with one weapon, a .30 machine gun mounted on the plane's loading ramp, which faces backwards. Plans are in the works to add a forward-facing, 3-barrel Gatling gun in the near future. The technical wizardry that makes the Osprey both a plane and a helicopter is contained in huge devices known as nacelles, pieces of equipment that sit like pods on the wings outside the plane and just behind the cockpit. The nacelles are what move the blades back and forth into different positions, up as a helicopter, down as a plane.
As far as the nacelles themselves rolling up and down, there's a giant screw run by a hydraulic motor. Once again, electronically controlled from the cockpit. Wherever they request them, the screw turns and moves the nacelles up and down.
What is perhaps most stunning is that the pilot does it all with the touch of a button, a very tiny button, no bigger than a quarter, that moves the 7,000-pound nacelles that change the Osprey from a helicopter into a plane and back again. The button is known as a thumb wheel.
This 7,000-plus pound nacelle with a 38-foot diameter rotor system is completely controlled by a thumb wheel. Your hand rests on the thrust control lever, just kind of like that, and your thumb naturally falls on the thumb wheel. It's an extraordinarily powerful control surface, all controlled via this tiny little button.
Kind of a standing joke that we have when guys, pilots are wrestling around. You know, we always protect our left thumb, because if that goes down, then, you know, then the pilot's hard down.
In the practiced hands of Marine Squadron VMM 263, the Osprey now stands poised for duty in the desert sands of Iraq. More than 20 years ago, in another desert not far away, the idea for the Osprey was born. In 1979, more than 3,000 extremist students in Iran seized the U.S. Embassy. Then President Jimmy Carter ordered a mission to rescue 66 hostages.
Planning for this rescue effort began shortly after our embassy was seized.
But the mission was a disaster, ending in aircraft crashing in southern Iran at a remote location codenamed Desert One.
To my deep regret, 8 of the crewmen of the 2 aircraft were killed.
That disaster led to demands to develop a new type of aircraft that could not only take off and land vertically, but also could carry combat troops and do so at speed. By 1982, a partnership of Bell Helicopter and Boeing had won a U.S. government contract. They had Ospreys on the drawing board and later in testing. The plane first took to the skies on March 19, 1989. But with costs quickly doubling, the Osprey ran into major political opposition. Worse than that, the Osprey also encountered a series of crashes. The first crash occurred in 1991, with all crew members miraculously escaping alive. In 1992, a second crash killed 9 on board, 4 Marines and 5 civilians. But the worst was yet to come. In another 8 years, there would be 2 more crashes, killing 23 Marines.
I mean, if you're going to talk tough times, it would probably, at least in my experience, it'd begin with the mishap in Arizona, in Marana, Arizona, in April 2000. That with combined with the mishap later in the year in December of 2000, right there in eastern North Carolina. I mean, both, tremendous tragedies in and of themselves. Both, aircraft were full of friends of mine.
A witness to the April crash in Arizona, Rock was flying in formation in one of 4 Ospreys, waiting to go into a landing zone.
One section was going in to put some Marines in, while the second section was holding because we were going in to help with the extract.
From a couple of miles back, Rock saw everything start to go wrong.
You could absolutely see what was going on. We got a little side view mirror in the cockpit, and the first thing I saw was a reflected flash of that. I don't ever see light in my rearview mirror at night anymore and not think about that night.
That crash was blamed on pilot error, but the crash in December 2000 was caused by faulty wiring and possible design flaws. The program was put on hold. At first, investigators thought that the nacelles, the essence of the Osprey's function, would have to be reinvented.
There's no doubt about it. The aircraft was this close to not happening anymore. If they hadn't figured that out, again, the impression was the program may have been canceled.
In time, investigators and engineers found ways to fix those technical problems and save the program. But the Osprey's bad reputation hung on and began to be automatically attached to any mention of it in the media. It was inevitably described as the troubled V22 Osprey. Today, these pilots and crews are now ready to go. After flying and working on the Osprey for 2 years, they want to put the memories of the tragedies behind them. Despite the old track record, they say, the Osprey's day has come. In fact, those whose lives depend on the Osprey are now its strongest defenders.
We all have families. I have 3 kids. I have a beautiful wife. None of us have any desire to be flying an aircraft that we think is going to kill us.
But as much as the commander and his pilots support the Osprey V22, can the aircraft survive its naysayers? Those who would judge the plane on its troubled past and not its potential. Even worse, could they cancel the Osprey's future before it even sees combat? Finally, 2 months after the V-22 Osprey arrived in Iraq, the revolutionary but controversial aircraft is assigned to carry troops into combat. The squadron has been ordered to prepare for assault missions, to carry teams of Marine infantry forces on the offense into the vast deserts of western Iraq's Anbar province. It's a brutal region made famous by the Battle of Fallujah. Some see it as the crucible of U.S. efforts in Iraq. Osprey Crew Chief Joshua DeBoer knows all too well how bad it's been and how valuable the Osprey can be. He first served in Iraq in 2004, flying as a crew chief in a CH-46 Sea Knight Frog helicopter, the Osprey's predecessor. In the Battle of Fallujah, De Boer was in the lead chopper returning to base after dropping off troops when his helicopter came under attack from rocket-propelled grenades.
Just south of Fallujah there, we took RPG fire, and one of the RPGs hit us. So it took out one engine, our electric power, and our hydraulic power all in one shot. So we didn't have a lot to work with, needless to say.
De Boer and another Marine were in the back of the frog. Flying at about 100 feet off the ground, the pilots decided to try to make it back on one engine. But then fire broke out in the back of the helicopter.
We tried to put it out. We couldn't put it out. Meanwhile, the entire time, the fire's getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
With the flames now wrapping around them, De Boer and his partner were trapped.
I'm guessing between 20 and 50 feet, my other crew chief probably jumped out of the aircraft while we were still in the air. We hit the ground. The impact threw me into the cockpit face first, smashing my face against the instrument panel.
The helicopter crashed and burned. Amazingly, everyone on board escaped alive, although several with serious injuries, including De Boer.
30% of my body with second-degree burns and lacerations to my face. You can actually see my skull in a couple of spots. It was kind of cool.
His trip to hell and back taught him one big lesson, that it is better to fly high and fast, as in the Osprey, and stay far away from ground fire.
I feel safer flying faster and higher in this aircraft than I do at 200 feet and half the speed is what we do now. I do not fear for my life anytime I fly, so.
As they prepare for their new missions, the pilots and crew chiefs gather in their ready rooms, top-secret, high-tech centers lined with maps of the region and equipped with sophisticated computer programs. Here they plan every moment of the missions they face, every corner of the terrain over which they will fly, and every challenge they will encounter. As both a pilot and a ground forces commander, Major Bob Brody has considerable experience in the Anbar region. He thinks the Osprey is a particularly good fit for this battle space.
It has some unique capabilities to land in desert terrain that would be very difficult for a helicopter to land in, which is going to enable Marines to get into places that we couldn't get into before. I think if we maintain flexibility and can go after very small targets very quickly, what we do is we deny the enemy the ability to maneuver. And we interdict them, we disrupt them to the point where they can't mass and they cannot attack us.
For the first time, the Osprey will face a tactical mission. The big moment is here. 6 other aircraft will join the Ospreys on the missions. With 24 hours to go, all aircraft and infantry commanders converge to finalize exact logistics and what role each of them will play.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I think you all know me, I'm Brody, Austin fans. Here's, obviously, for our planning preparation for this thing, this is a very complex mission in comparison to what we used to be doing. So I think that it's going to require that everyone's on their A game tomorrow above and beyond what we used to.
There are still plenty of ground commanders who remain skeptical and worry about putting their troops aboard such a controversial aircraft. One of their major concerns, the Ospreys lack the ability to auto-rotate, an emergency maneuver executed by helicopter pilots if their engines fail. In auto-rotation, a pilot uses downdraft to get the rotors spinning as fast as possible to regain control of an aircraft and soften a crash landing. Because of its different design, the Osprey can't do this maneuver. But the team is confident they don't need auto-rotation. With its awesome horsepower, the Osprey can fly on one of its 2 engines in an emergency.
And the chances of having 2 engines stop working at the same time are minuscule.
I can't imagine both engines, receiving battle damage at the same time. If both engines are shot up, you probably have other issues, and auto rotation is probably the last thing you're going to have to think about.
But there are other problems. In part because of its speed, one of the real challenges will be how to fly the Osprey at safe distances from other aircraft. Deconfliction, or keeping space between all the aircraft on the missions to avoid collisions, is an object of concern.
Deconfliction and working and operating around other aircraft, it's a serious business. It's honestly a meeting of the minds. It's a roundtable discussion, figuring out where assets need to be, and that is the next step. You can deconflict by altitude, by time, or by lateral, just by slapping a boundary down. Hey, you own this side, I own that side.
This aerial ballet, and which is what it's going to work out to me tomorrow. And I know we'll do well, but just remember that the reason we're out there is to hit, disrupt, and conduct, scouting and screening. And I think we're going to learn a lot.
The moment of truth is fast approaching. Tensions are high. It has taken decades to get to this point, but the squadron knows the morning will come quickly. Dawn breaks over the desert sands of Anbar province, casting first light on Al-Assad Air Base, the second largest military operation in Iraq. In hangars along a helicopter flight line, members of a squadron known as the Thunder Chickens have been working through the night to ensure that 10 Osprey aircraft are in top shape. After decades of development, years of testing and training, after 2 months of preparation, the day of reckoning has arrived. This is the day that Osprey pilots and crews will, for the first time, take to the skies to fly ground forces on a combat mission.
I don't know if you call it nervousness or just anxiousness, but yeah, there's always a little bit of butterflies before each mission.
Boarding one of the Ospreys, Major Bob Brody, a veteran pilot and a ground forces commander, introduces the grunts to the aircraft. Most of them are seeing it up close for the first time.
I got a very important question. Where are the armrests? Right here.
Those of you that have not ridden on this aircraft, it is a sporty ride, and it's much different than on the 53. 53 kind of comes down. When it goes forward, it kind of leans forward. This is an airplane for all intents and purposes. So when they pull out of that zone, you're going to feel a lot of acceleration. So here's the last thing, gents. Obviously, everything goes sour on us and we need to start fighting. You just take care of business and don't worry about anything. All right, you just start taking care of that target.
This is an aircraft unlike anything they've flown in before.
Again, I can't overemphasize the acceleration and deceleration. All right, we're going to accelerate, rather rapidly.
To deconstruct how they work, watch this again. First, the initial dive. The copter drops almost straight down. Its rotor blades are spinning at a steady 214 RPM, but they're not actually pushing much air. For the engines, this is the easy part. 50 feet from the ground, the copters level out for their attack run. The rotors are biting hard into the air, forcing air backwards to propel the EH-101 at its top speed of nearly 200 miles an hour. The engines have to take the strain and keep the rotors spinning at exactly the same rate of 214 RPM. despite their extra workload. Every movement of the rotor blades is communicated directly to the engines by the helicopter's onboard computers. But the moment's approaching that will set these engines apart from all that have gone before. This extraordinary aerial switchback from top speed to a dead stop and back again.
The trick, for me, is to get the aircraft turned around through 180 degrees and to lose what could be up to 180 miles an hour to zero in a very short distance. As you'll appreciate, that's a very aggressive maneuver.
The main rotors are fighting the air. First to stop the aircraft, then turn it around, then to bring it down fast. It's an enormous shock to the rotor blades, and it's transferred directly to the engines. If the engines stall, as older generation engines might, the 15-ton aircraft would fall from the sky. But the EH-101's engines absorb the shock of the switchback and keep the rotor spinning at a constant rate, pulling it through its violent 180-degree turn. And in the event that one of the EH-101's engines is shot out or fails, its onboard computers will alert the remaining two engines to make up the power difference and allow the aircraft not only to continue flying, but to continue with its mission.
Of course, on the battlefield, huge amount of redundancy and reliability, because you can take battle damage, lose an engine, and still carry on with the mission.
Most of the weight early helicopters were actually lifting was the weight of their heavy and underpowered piston engines. The development of the lighter but immensely more powerful gas turbine jet engine in the 1950s allowed helicopters to lift much greater loads. What had been an aerial gymnast was now also a beast of burden, transporting up to 40 tons through the air. And while the EH-101 is not designed to be a heavyweight lifter, it can still carry a truck or pack 50 evacuees into its cargo area. And most importantly, its 3 computer-controlled engines allow it to hover rock solid in winds over 50 miles an hour. It's a critical advantage when an entire squad of troops needs to be delivered quickly to a battlefield. In the rule of 3 that governs all helicopter flight, the main rotor provides lift and propulsion. The engine, constant power. But without one more critical component, even the latest supercopters would spin uncontrollably through the sky. It's the final engineering secret to the helicopter's success, the tail that wags the dog. And when something goes wrong with this part, look out. Heavy weather, high-octane jet fuel, and a 15-ton helicopter hovering above the deck of a warship at sea. This British Royal Navy EH-101 is about to refuel without landing on the ship. It's one of the most difficult maneuvers a helicopter can be asked to do, and few are asked to do it. But this is just the sort of high-risk operation supercopters are designed for, saving precious time that would be taken up by landing to refuel.
Its key role is force protection, to remain airborne 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, searching out the surface threat from ships and the subsurface threat from submarines.
During this refueling, the EH-101 maintains a precisely controlled hover. Its powerful gas turbine engines drive 5 of the most advanced rotor blades ever created, keeping it rock steady in the air. But guiding it closer and closer to the ship and the waiting fuel line is the third component in the rule of 3 that governs all helicopter flight. Its whirling tail rotor. "5,000 tons of ship, 15 tons of helicopter are now connected by a hose full of volatile aviation fuel. There's no margin of error. But the EH-101 doesn't deviate in the air. Thanks to the precision guidance of its tail rotor.
The tail rotor is absolutely fundamental to the flight of helicopters. If you like, it's the tail which wags the dog.
Fueled up, the EH-101 banks away on a mission that will test one of the primary combat roles it was designed for: hunting and destroying enemy submarines. The EH-101 finds and tracks the sub with its sophisticated and highly classified onboard sonar. It closes in on its target and pulls into a dead hover. Then, it lowers the submarine's worst nightmare: a sophisticated dipping sonar array. Beneath the surface, this underwater listening device opens up like a high-tech umbrella, trapping the enemy submarine in a sonar net. If this war game were for real, the sub would be cornered and facing a potentially deadly attack. Targeted by one of the EH-101's 4 Stingray homing torpedoes. It can also carry sophisticated depth charges, as well as sea-skimming anti-ship missiles to take out enemy ships. But to win this game of war, the EH-101 has relied on its tail rotor to steer it through the sky. It's the tail rotor's job to counter and control the powerful rotational force generated by the EH-101's main rotor blades. The main rotor wants to spin the body of the helicopter one way. The tail rotor forces air in the opposite direction. And by controlling the amount of air forced out by the tail rotor, the pilot uses it as a rudder to steer the helicopter through the sky. Of all the hurdles early helicopter designers had to overcome, stopping the aircraft from spinning around its main rotor was perhaps the most difficult. Double rotors spinning in opposite directions was the first solution. Then came the twin rotor system, with the spin of each set of rotor blades canceling out the other. This did provide an answer, and also gave helicopters like the Boeing Chinook greater lift capabilities than most single-rotored craft. But it was the development of the tail rotor concept that finally gave the helicopter its unique agility in the air.
We can choose which direction we want to go, when we want to go, at the rate we want to go.
It's a David and Goliath dance between tail and main rotors. But losing a tail rotor is every helicopter pilot's worst-case scenario.
One of the things that pilots fear most is losing tail rotor control, or tail rotor authority as it's called. In other words, if that tail rotor doesn't behave, you can't fly in a straight line, the helicopter becomes unstable. And we've seen, sadly, many crashes with that happening.
When difficult rescues or evacuations are being attempted on uneven terrain, the tail rotor is especially vulnerable. Of the three components that keep a helicopter in the air, it's the one that usually comes closest to the ground. That's why the EH-101's tail rotor is positioned high on its tail, nearly 9 feet off the ground. As every experienced pilot knows, lose tail rotor control, even momentarily, and you can easily lose your aircraft and probably your life. As the helicopter spins off on a one-way trip to catastrophe. Then, the components that kept it airborne shatter it against the ground, literally beating itself and its passengers to death. But many helicopter crashes occur when we ask too much of this unique flying machine.
The jobs they get assigned are so very dangerous.
We're asking them to do things that other aircraft can't do. Whether it's going up to the top of Everest and plucking off an injured climber at 21,000 feet, or going into the eye of a hurricane and bringing back people from the perfect storm. Helicopters can save lives, and you can get them to hospital faster than any other means.
We put helicopters into extreme situations for the simple reason that nothing else can do the job. Helicopters can punch a hole in a hurricane and rescue men and women who would otherwise be condemned. Helicopters can take the fight against a forest fire to the very heart of the inferno, an aerial assault by water where no man or machine dare go. And as an air ambulance, a rapid response agent of mercy, when minutes, even seconds, can mean the difference between life and death. The helicopter is the undisputed champion of the injured and the sick. When a catastrophe like the South Asian tsunami strikes, marooning millions in wastelands scoured of roads and airstrips, it's the helicopter alone that can bring relief and salvation from the sky. This was one of the greatest airlifts in history. Thousands of tons of humanitarian aid brought into some of the most inaccessible places on Earth, saving the lives of thousands of men, women, and children. The latest generation of supercopters, like the EH-101, are pushing the boundaries of vertical flight. But there's still one component that makes all of it possible. The human in the driver's seat. Mastering a helicopter's movement through the air takes both hands, both feet, and supreme confidence. And when it's a supercopter worth tens of millions, there's no room for error. Few things are more difficult than controlling a helicopter in the sky.
Go ahead.
They say that if you can hop up and down rub your tummy in a circular fashion and your head in a counterclockwise fashion with your eyes closed, then you can fly a helicopter.
It's the helicopter pilot who transforms mere machine into an agent of salvation or an instrument of vengeance. The rule of three, main rotor, gas turbine engine, and tail rotor allows the helicopter to fly. But someone still has to control it.
But at the end of the day, it does come down to the pilot. And I think it takes an extraordinary brand of aviator.
At any given moment in flight, a helicopter can go up or down, side to side, forward or backward, or virtually any combination of those directions. It takes exceptional coordination and concentration just to keep a helicopter in the air. Massimo Porro commands the Italian Navy's #1 Flying Shark Squadron. He demonstrates the extraordinary relationship between the tail rotor and the main rotor blades. Both hands control the main rotor. The left-hand stick moves the helicopter up and down. The right-hand stick moves it in every other direction. Both feet control the tail rotor, changing the angle of the rotor blades to point the aircraft where the pilot wants.
We have the pedals, which move the blades of the tail rotor to oppose the torque of the main rotor. This allows us to steer the helicopter in the direction we want. But it has to be done in a very coordinated way, because compared to a fixed-wing aircraft, the helicopter is inherently unstable.
But when we master the helicopter's rule of three, there are few sights more breathtaking.
It was like strapping on a costume in the morning that would allow me to do superhuman things. You weren't flying anymore, you were the machine.
But today's supercopters are far more than mere helicopters. Behind the cockpit of this Royal Navy EH-101 is a sophisticated command and control center. It can direct a battle on land or sea, or launch advanced aerial weapons to destroy a submarine or an enemy ship, or carry out reconnaissance and electronic surveillance. And today's supercopters are so technologically advanced, they can actually fly themselves. The EH-101's powerful onboard computers drive one of the most sophisticated autopilot systems ever put in an aircraft. The autopilot can even put this 15-ton aircraft into a hover at 40 feet and keep alongside a moving ship at sea without the pilot ever needing to touch the controls. In combat, the autopilot can do much of the actual flying, while the pilot focuses on the mission objectives. But ultimately, a human still has to be the mind of the machine. However sophisticated the autopilot, only a human pilot can actually land an EH-101. Which is why they have their own virtual world to train in. One of the most advanced flight simulators on the planet. Inside this 24-foot steel sphere is an exact EH-101 cockpit, complete with high-fidelity graphics. The helicopter's movements in flight are precisely mimicked by computer-controlled hydraulics.
The fear element is there, trust me, close to the ship, and you're flying that last half-mile approach to a flight deck at night in filthy weather, and the ship is pitching and rolling, and you're on minimum tactical lighting. I've certainly been seriously scared in helicopter simulators because they are so real, and walked out of the cockpit white and shaking, I suspect, if the truth be known.
It cost around $5 million to equip a single pilot with the skills required to fly out of this high-fidelity computer game into the real world. But when the aircraft you're flying is worth $100 million, you can't afford to let it down. So in the simulator's operations room, instructors create nightmare scenarios for the pilots. Emergencies far too dangerous to be simulated in a real EH-101.
We can simulate major systems failures and crash landing. I think probably the most challenging situations are coping with major system failure, but continuing to fight the aircraft and get back to the ship 200 miles away, maybe on two engines with navigation systems that have failed.
The training never stops. Even the most experienced pilots have to keep their hours up in the simulator to maintain their mastery of the EH-101. But they consider themselves not so much elite as lucky.
The father of the helicopter, Leonardo da Vinci, would love to fly this helicopter. You could just see him saying, well, I told you so. 500 years ago, I told you we could do this. And here it is, the ultimate helicopter.
The age of the helicopter has been brief, but brilliant. In war and peace and tragedy, where no aircraft has dared go, the helicopter has gone. And now, the science of vertical flight has reached perhaps its finest expression. Now is the time of the supercopters.